Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be revisiting a topic that we've done in the past, and that's talking about the mistakes that we made in the previous season. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 3 mistakes that we made throughout the 2022 season. Well, it's great to share success stories, what habitat improvements work, how do we put these in, what strategies are we focusing on during the hunting season. It's equally important to talk about failures as well. We learn a lot from our successes and we try to build upon those going forward, but I do think that we learn much faster from our failures. And so that's what I want to try to talk about in this video, is the failures or the shortcomings that we kind of went through or had during the 2022 season. And these aren't going to be in any particular order from best to worst, or I guess in this case worst to even worse. There's no real order here, and some of these aren't even related to the hunting season, but these shortcomings or these failures directly impacted our hunting season. Which brings me to the first failure of the 2022 season, and this is something that I did, or I guess what you'll see I didn't do, and that's I didn't get working on my habitat improvement projects or some of the projects that I needed to get done on the property to help with those habitat improvement projects early enough. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit just so you guys can understand how that directly impacted the hunting season on this property. This is a new property for us. We closed on this property in April of last year and we moved in early May. And one of the first things that I needed to have done to really start working on any habitat improvement projects is I needed to have this place logged off. So I knew that going into it, that I needed to have this place logged off before I started putting in food plots, before I started really putting in a lot of bedding opportunity here. It didn't make sense to go cut a bedding area just to have the place logged off and potentially destroy that bedding area that I worked hard on, or a food plot. The first thing was I needed to have the place logged off. And I kind of procrastinated on that a little bit. And by the time I did start working on that, contacted a forester. The forester went through, marked some of the trees, started bidding the jobs out to multiple loggers. By the time that the loggers were going to start walking through the property and with the forester was going to start marking the trees, we were actually into that early part of the hunting season, and it actually progressed throughout the hunting season. I think the last time somebody was on the property might have been November 20. So the entire hunting season here on the property, I had foresters, surveyors, loggers were walking the property, and this added a lot of human pressure to areas of the property that the deer probably weren't used to. If you want to increase your chances of having predictable deer movement throughout the fall on your hunting property, then you need to reduce a lot of that human intrusion on your property. And that's kind of the opposite of what happened on this property. Again, we had a lot of people walking around this place throughout the fall. So what I should have done, knowing that I needed to have the property logged off as soon as we walked it for the first time prior to purchasing it, once we closed, I should have contacted a forester right away to get working on marking these trees. That way we could have started that process much sooner. And that way that could have potentially wrapped up prior to Labor Day, prior to when we normally like to let our properties sit, before the hunting season. The next failure or mistake that I want to talk about here that we made this past hunting season is directly related to hunting. And it comes down to not practicing enough prior to the season. And again, to kind of go into the scenario here so you guys can figure out what was the failure, what was the mistake. Last year on November 15, which is the firearm opener here in Michigan, one of our guys around, I think it was 9 in the morning, had a nice buck coming right up to them. They took a shot at this deer a little over 100 yards away, missed the deer. Clean miss on the deer. We made sure that it was a 100% clean miss. Deer ran away. So that is a big missed opportunity there. You wait all season to have a shot opportunity at one of the bucks that you're targeting, and you have a pretty decent shot at a little over 100 yards, and with a rifle, as long as you are practicing with your rifle, you should be able to make that shot. And it didn't happen. We took that shot and it didn't happen. And I wanted to address that shortcoming because, again, you're putting in so much work on your property, getting it ready for the season. You're putting in long hours in the stand, passing on those other deer, hoping for that one chance at that target buck, that one that you've been waiting for all season. And then to get that opportunity only to miss, it happens, guys, but it didn't have to happen. It's not that the rifle wasn't sighted in. We did sight the rifles in. I think a couple days beforehand. It was right on at 100 yards. But unfortunately, this kind of maybe came down to one of those instances where you don't shoot enough. Regardless of your weapon of choice, you need to be practicing a lot. It's not just good enough to go out there, hit the target one time and say, okay, my bow's on, my crossbow's on, my firearm is on, I'm ready for the woods. You need to practice more often. The more repetition that you can get, the more comfortable you're gonna be using that weapon. So when that opportunity presents itself, you have a much higher probability of capitalizing on it. And this might not be the best comparison, but it's definitely a comical one, unless you're the guy that I'm about to mention. But think about an extra point in football. Right? Like that's such a routine play that most guys don't even think about it. They just go out there and kick the extra point. Like it's just like clockwork. When you score a touchdown, what are you gonna get? You're gonna get 7 points. Right? You don't even think about you're only gonna come away with 6 unless you're the Dallas Cowboys, right? Because their kicker missed 4 extra points in a row during the playoffs. And again, that should be a relatively routine play. And so you wanna just make sure that you don't look at that 25-yard bow shot or whatever you're comfortable shooting, or like that 100-yard shot with a firearm as a routine shot. You need to make sure that you're practicing. You need to make sure that you're getting that repetition in, because it's not a gimme. You can't just make sure that your rifle is on or your bow is on or your crossbow is on and go out to the woods. You need to continue to practice throughout the hunting season just to make sure that you are ready when that opportunity comes. And the final mistake that I want to talk about in today's video had a huge impact on our hunting season. Not necessarily on this property. Again, this is a new property. I didn't really have high hopes for it. But we have a property that we've owned for quite a while that we manage. And we have high expectations for that property every single season. But we made a mistake this year on that property that really hurt our chances to get an opportunity at those older bucks in the neighborhood. And that mistake was not developing a relationship with one of our neighbors. So again, I'll kind of go into the story a little bit so you can understand what happened, how it impacted our season, and what we could have done differently to completely avoid this. A little background, we typically do not hunt that property until mid to late October. We really like to let that sit for at least a month, sometimes even a month and a half before we start pushing into those higher odds stand locations. And this season was no different. I think this year we were waiting for that weekend, I think it was around October 22, Saturday, to push into those higher odds stand locations. And I believe it was Thursday, October 20, I got a text from my dad and it just said, check your phone. And normally that means, we run cell cameras and the notifications get sent right to your phone. Normally that means check your phone, there's a big buck walking around, he's right by, this stand, can't wait for this weekend, it's gonna be a good one, right? Well, I checked my phone and it's a guy walking around our property. So that doesn't happen very often. We have pretty good relationships with most of our neighbors. We know kind of where the property borders are, the whole thing is posted, and that really shocked us. So we were like, holy cow, there's a guy walking around our property. He doesn't have camo on, he's just walking around the property, but he's kind of looking at the ground. It's just a still image, no video. There's a video on the camera, but the picture was sent to the cell phone. So it's like, we got to get up there because we just need to figure out, what's going on here. Is this some guy who's just trespassing on our property? Is this a hunter from maybe a few doors down that we haven't met yet? He's maybe tracking through. We just need to know what the story is, because right now he is trespassing on the property and he's walking through areas that we have not been in for a month and a half. And so we did drive up to the property. It took us about 45 minutes to get there, all while still getting pictures of this guy as he's setting off different cell cameras. And as we pulled up, you could still see a flashlight in the woods. And so we decided we would kind of wait by the cars out by the road instead of sneaking up on this guy in the woods. Again, we don't at this point know why he's in there, and we don't really want to sneak up on somebody in the woods. So he came out and we just said, hey, what's going on? This is our property. Do you need help with anything? And he said, yeah, I shot a deer. It kind of ran through your property. And obviously we have no problem with someone tracking a deer through our property. That happens quite frequently. When deer are shot in the neighborhood, they run back to our property. We did confirm that he did have blood going through, so he wasn't making up a story there. But we would just like to know that it's happening. And so we talked to him for a little bit. We got to know him. Unfortunately, neither one of us were able to continue to track that night, neither my dad and I or this other hunter. All of us had other obligations we had to get to, but we did give this guy permission to go in there the following day and go in there and get his deer and get it out. Unfortunately, this is where the mistake happened, and we should have been, I guess, more clear with kind of how we wanted him to treat the property. Throughout the whole next day, and we work, so we were not able to be there with him. And again, this is one of the other mistakes that we made. We were not there with him. We were getting pictures of him throughout the day, probably from 9 in the morning all the way till 6:30 at night, grid searching the property. After talking with him later that evening, turns out he kind of lost blood shortly after the deer crossed the property line. And at that point, he just started to grid search the entire thing. And our property is pretty thick. We've worked on it pretty hard to make it that way. And he kind of was just checking every bedding area that he could, hoping to find this deer. Unfortunately for him, he never found the deer that he shot, and we never found it while we were walking to and from stand locations during the hunting season. But the other part that really hurt our chances during the hunting season was the fact that our entire property, for the most part, was grid searched by this guy looking for that deer. So the property that doesn't see human pressure for most of the year, and definitely not for a month and a half prior to us going in to hunt it for the first time, just saw the most human pressure that it's ever seen probably in the last decade. This was 2 days or maybe 3 days prior to when we were going to hunt that property for the first time. But again, we gave him permission to walk the property, but we got a hold of him later that evening, and we just kind of said, hey, like, you gave it your best shot. I think this one might have made it, or maybe he made it to the other side of the property line, and he's not on our property anymore. Let's call this one off. But at that point, the damage was already done. Just to kind of give you an extent of the deer movement and how it changed after that, we were getting a couple hundred pictures a day from all the different cameras that we had on our property. The following day, it went down to 3. I'm not joking. Like, not daytime to night pictures. I'm talking about 3 pictures of deer total. And so what was our mistake? Our mistake was not developing a relationship with this guy prior to this past hunting season, and also to not lay ground rules on how we want the property to be treated, and also not being present with him during the track. We should have been there. If we were there, we could have helped them track the deer. Maybe we would have seen something that he didn't, been able to follow it a little further, or maybe we'd be able to get a dog on that deer to follow the trail after the blood dries up. But if we were present, well, we would have done everything that we could to find this deer. We would have given it everything that we had. We would not have resorted to a grid search of the entire property. So that was our mistake, and hopefully you guys can learn from our mistake and just try to develop a relationship with your neighbors. Try to set some ground rules as to when are they allowed to come on your property. I think that you should always let somebody come on your property to track a deer, because obviously you want to have that reciprocated. Eventually you're going to shoot one, it's going to go across the fence. You want to make sure that your neighbors are going to allow you to go and get your deer. And this could have all been avoided by simply introducing ourselves, trading phone numbers, so that when he hits that deer, he can call us and say, hey, I hit one, ran across the road onto your property. We could say, oh, all right, we're on our way up. We'll help you track, kind of shift our obligations around a little bit to hopefully find the deer. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's unsuccessful. But at least if we were there and we were present for the track, it wouldn't have escalated to a grid search on the property. And so the impact on the property would have been much less. So guys, hopefully you can learn from our mistakes that we made this past season and develop a relationship with all of the neighbors around your property, not just the ones that do most of the hunting. We have great relationships with a lot of the properties that surround ours that do a lot of the hunting, but unfortunately we did not have a relationship with this neighbor, with this hunter, and it came back to bite us this past season. But guys, those are the top 3 mistakes that we made throughout the 2022 season. Hopefully, hearing about them can help you avoid those same mistakes on your properties. If you guys do have any mistakes that you made this past season, and you think that somebody would benefit from hearing it so they don't make that same mistake, drop those in the comments. Or if you have any questions, drop those in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.